Okay, I wanted to just show really quick what an index is and kind of the benefit of what an index is on our collections. And so for looking through this exercise, it says, hey, create a bunch of collections in our Mongo database. I think there's 4 or 5 or 6 collections that we're creating in this lab. And then it says create at least one index for each collection. And one observation is that one observation that was shared with me this morning is that, hey, I did notice that our collections already have an index. And so if I kind of pick my issue tracker 2, right now, earlier in the week, I went ahead and I made a bugs collection and a users collection. And you can kind of see just in the GUI here that by default, they have an index. And yet still I'm asking to create another index. And so what's the advantage of an index? And if you've ever heard of a B tree structure, it's an algorithm type of way of storing data to retrieve it fast, to retrieve it quickly. And so a B tree is a way, it's a hierarchy, kind of you step down through the nodes that will enable fast lookups. I mean, I think the quick version that you need to understand is that an index speeds up the search. Okay, so when you have a database, you have a lot of information stored in the database, right? You could have thousands of records or thousands of documents, as they're called in Mongo. You could have millions of documents, right? And when you have millions of documents and you say, hey, I'm looking for a specific document, you want that document to be returned quickly, right? You're searching for a document, you want it to come back quick. A great example, right, is to have an index like on a website with username and password. Users are going to be logging in all the time. They're going to be providing their username and their password. So that is going to be something that's going to be searched for frequently. Okay, so the general idea is that you want to find the columns or the properties. Again, I keep using these interchangeable terms. You want to find the properties that are going to be looked for or searched for frequently and put an index on them. And by default, what's happening behind the scenes is it's creating this B tree index. You don't really have to know the technical details of how a B tree works. Just kind of realize that's the structure that's being created here. When you create an index, and by creating an index, it speeds up the search. Therefore, your username and password, your logins can happen faster. Does that make sense? Like username and password, if you create an index on those properties, then logins can happen faster. Okay? But you don't create an index on every property. Okay? It's not a free cost. Okay? To create the B tree, it actually slows down inserts. Okay, so when you're inserting new usernames and passwords, it's kind of have to rearrange the B tree. Okay, so while read operations happen faster, it might slow down the other operations. So there is a cost associated with indexes. Okay, so if it's something that a lot of lookups are happening on a certain property, then you might consider adding an index on that property. Right? But just realizing that by creating an index, there is a cost associated with these other operations. It'll slow down the other operations. Okay? So that is like the general theory behind an index. It's not complicated. You guys are familiar with indexes. If you've ever, read a book and you want to look something up quickly in the book, you go to the index in the back of the book. You look up the term, and it tells you what page to find that term on. Okay, so you guys are already familiar with the concept of what is an index. It helps you look something up faster. Okay, And so, those are the basics, and that's why we don't create an index on every property, because that doesn't make sense. You just want to create an index on the columns that you figure and you can gather statistics on what's being looked up frequently. Mongo will show you those kinds of statistics. So going into like users, first off, let's look at the index. What index is created? By default, our ID column has an index on it, right? So Tim, you were saying, hey, I already see this index here. That index is on the ID column. We're probably not in, the application, an end user doesn't know their ID. That ID is invisible to them. So they're not giving us their ID to look them up by their ID. So that doesn't really do us a whole lot of good. In many cases, we need to create another index. And, we might create an index on both the email and password. Okay, so how might you do that? Well, this create index command is really all you need. So it's DB, the name of your collection, create index, it's a method, pass in an object, and in this case, the category is the property, :1. That just means kind of ascending order versus like a descending order. If that can make a difference. If most of your lookups, for whatever reason, are by like a date or something, and you're looking up like recent dates, you might want to order your dates by a certain order. And in this case, username and password, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference whether it's ascending or descending order. But what we're looking for in this case is a compound index, because we want to look up on username and password. So here it's pretty simple. It's the same create index, and we're going to provide it on 2 columns, both of them ascending order. And we don't need to change the collation, to be got some different options, but really we don't need to mess with anything else. That's all we need to do is we're going to create an index. We're going to say username and password, and that's all you need for right now. There are some more complex things that you wind up doing with indexes. For example, we've seen in our labs, you guys can remember, DB, .movies, all the genres that were documentary, right? And if you did a lowercase d, right, it was a case-sensitive search, right? It returned no movies, right? But what if you wanted to create a case-insensitive search? Okay? By kind of coming in here, we can change that. So by changing a correlation strength of 1 or 2, we can actually create a case-insensitive index. So when we're doing a lookup in Mongo, it allows us to do a case-insensitive search, and it actually returns movies with documentaries if we provide a lowercase d. Okay, so that's another use case that I've seen with these indexes. Not only speeding up the search, but allowing for some more flexible queries is what I would consider that. Okay, and that's by changing this correlation strength down to a 1 or a 2. Okay, but nonetheless, let's go ahead and create an index here. And you can do this in the GUI, and I'm totally fine with that. But since I showed you the command line, let's go ahead and open up MongoDB shell. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and use my issue tracker 2. And let's look at the command here. Here's our create index, and here's create index with multiple. Again, it's called a compound index, where you're using two properties together. So if I show collections here, I've got bugs and users. So I'm going to say db.users dot create index, and our first object is what are the properties. We're just separating them with commas, and my users, if I kind of click over, have an email and a password. So these are the two properties. If I go back to my shell, I'll say email, and this is going to be in quotes, email :1. Okay, this one doesn't show the quotes. Let me take the quotes off. Email :1, password :1, and this is at a bare minimum. Okay, this kind of gives me the name. It just created this index. It's called email _1, password _1. It just kind of gave me a default name. If I go back here and kind of refresh my issue tracker 2, if I find my refresh button under these dots and refresh databases, it'll take a second here. There we go. If I go into my indexes, I could see my new index has been created. Okay, so the command itself, pretty simple, how to create an index. Like anything else in Mongo, the documentation, the docs are your best friend. Okay, it's a real simple command. A little bit of theory there, but then once you understand the basics of the theory, the actual create command is real simple. So I just did that on one collection. You get to do that on all 5 collections on this lab. Any questions? All right, I'm going to shut up. Let you give to it.